Now Warriors Club gets closer. Killybegs Captain is out there 3 wide, running in third and trying to stick to the pacemakers. And Promises Fulfilled is put to a ride at the top of the stretch. Killybegs Captain's running a big one after that stumble. He's second on the outside. And then comes Warriors Club down toward the rail, but Promises Fulfilled is going on now. And he's opened up by 3. And then it's Killybegs Captain, followed by Warriors Club. Nicodemus is fourth behind Promises Fulfilled, who comes down to the wire, a 4-length winner of the John A. Nehrude.
All right, welcome back here on Racing Rundown to our final race preview of this week. We had a lot of stuff that we were talking about this week in terms of stakes races all over the country, a couple at Churchill, the Ohio Derby, and a couple at Belmont Park. This is the final, as you can tell by the title. This is the Grade 2 True North at Belmont Park, a 6.5 furlong sprint, 4 horses 4 years old and upwards. Now, you take a look at this race, and this is another one. A lot of the races that we've done have been very intriguing races to look at from the betting perspective. There's a lot of fun races this weekend, and this is another one of those, because this is a big challenge race, because there's 2 horses in here that are obviously the class of the field in the 7 Promises Fulfilled and the 8 Firenze Fire, but they have a lot of baggage coming with them, be it layoffs or with Firenze Fire, the question with the trainer, the history of trainers with Jason Service, which we will address in a minute, but there's those 2, and then the other 6 horses in this race are all horses that haven't really had a winning effort in against top-level company like this. So it's a really intriguing race to look at from a betting perspective. I'm going to go through the field now really quickly. The 1 is Diamond King, 2 is Midnight Charlie, 3 is Wicked Trick, 4 is Wait For It, 5 is Yorkton, 6 is Stand the Man, and then 7 is Promises Fulfilled, and 8 is Firenze Fire. I'm going to pick it up with the 2 favorites right now. Starting with Firenze Fire, obviously, as anyone who has been following this game over the course of really nuts winter that we've had knows that the deal with this horse. Jason Service, his trainer, was indicted by the FBI for some really nasty allegations, with severe performance-enhancing drug use in horses, not just, an occasional positive test for something that isn't really bad, like lidocaine. These are serious drug charges, so I encourage, if you don't really know too much about it, definitely go read it. But Firenze Fire was not one of the horses that was named in the FBI report, but the question had to have been asked with every Jason Service horse running since then is, what kind of effort are we going to see from this horse? And with a lot of them, it hasn't really, the performances post Jason Service haven't really been there. And Firenze Fire is another one that you really have to ask the question about. Is he the same horse that he was with his previous trainer? Now, I will say there is still a case that can be made for him. I'm not completely writing him off at this point. This is kind of the prove-it race for Firenze Fire. You can make a little bit of an excuse in that last race. The track wasn't necessarily the greatest. You can also say that it was his first start off a pretty significant layoff, 4 months. This would be the race where Kelly Breen, one race in already 3 weeks ago, is going to have this horse. He's going to know him, have a race under his belt, and really have this horse in the best position to win. If he is still the type of horse that is going to be winning big graded stakes like this. So, I'm not super keen on him going into this because he does carry the baggage with him, but at the same time, you look at the rest of this field and there's a lot of question marks elsewhere. So Firenze Fire is definitely, he's definitely the horse where, if you can swallow the fact that he was trained by Jason Service and you can swallow the fact that he was coming off a layoff in his last race and it wasn't the greatest effort. It wasn't terrible. It was a 4th place finish. If you can swallow all of that, then you can talk yourself into picking him. And that leads to my next point with Promises Fulfilled. Dale Romans has talked about him on this show before, that he has been a horse that's really impressed him. And Promises Fulfilled has not been a bad horse in his career at all. He's a multiple graded stakes winner, grade 1 winner at 3. He won the Allen Jerkins and the Phoenix and the Amsterdam. He was a great, again, like I mentioned, graded stakes winner multiple times as a 3-year-old. He came back last year and he won a very similar race to this to John Nehrude at Belmont Park, but since then is coming off of 2 really subpar 6th place finishes in the Forgo and Phoenix States at Saratoga and Keeneland respectively. But going into this race now, he is coming off of essentially a 9-month layoff. It's 8 months and something like 3 weeks, so it's a really long layoff. So in a lot of circumstances, that would be a complete line through the horse, in my opinion at least. I have taken horses off of layoffs before, but not super keen about taking promises fulfilled off of a 8 3/4 essentially layoff or month layoff. So there's that, but you do have to circle back to he has won at Belmont Park before. Last year in the John Nehrude, very similar to this race. He was 3rd in the Woody Stevens in 2018. He has run some nice races. He is a horse that can run well and obviously has in the past. I just, at this point, I don't really know how the layoff is going to affect him, and I look at this and I don't really like him too much off the layoff. But it is going to segue to a lot of the other horses in this race. You see those two and you think, well, there's baggage with them, layoffs and the trainer situation. But with the other horses, there's not really much else in here. The 2 Edward Coletti horses are both, they kind of have the same resume of they've been able to run really well in allowance company, but when they step up into, in races like this, they just lack the consistency in black type and listed races, and Midnight Charlie has not run in a stakes race in his career. The other horse has run in a graded stake, the Pimlico Special last year. He was 4th in that, not terrible, but you don't see the consistency with them in the stakes areas. There's a lot of wins and in the money finishes and allowance and optional claiming races, and even in some claiming races. But there's not that consistency against stakes horses. Diamond King is the 3rd choice in this race. And, I look at him as a horse that might be a little bit overrated. He's a 5-to-1 shot in a race where there's not really a clear 3rd choice. He won the Stymie Stakes his last time running on the New York circuit. And he did what he needed to do there, but the Blame Stakes last start at Churchill was not great. The Bold Ruler was also a race that left a lot to be desired. He's another one that lacks the consistency at the graded stakes level. He's won a couple of black types and listed races, but he's running a lot of graded stakes in his career, and there hasn't really been much outside of running in graded stakes at Parks and Monmouth that aren't necessarily the toughest types of stakes races to run in. There's not really much, and also in Charlestown too. So, on those circuits, he can run well in those stakes, but in places like Belmont Park, he was 5th in the Bold Ruler last year. He was 7th in the Preakness in 2018. There's just not the consistency with him. So he's another horse that, you can look to, but he's not really anything to write home about in there. Wicked Trick for Linda Rice. He had a nice win streak after he was in a couple of claiming races. He went on a nice streak in allowance races, but stepping up to stakes company for the first time in 3 years this year in the Stymie, he ran 5th in that. So, you look to him and you say he's another one that can run really well in the allowance company, but in the stakes company, he has his 2 starts in stakes races have both been very poor performances in the Dixiana Bourbon and in the Stymie. So, he's another one that I don't really like too much in this race. The Canadian bred Yorkton, he has run 2 good seconds in 2 races down at Gulfstream, the Sir Shackleton and an allowance race. But running in graded stakes races, he was 6th in the World of Trouble. His only 3 starts in the United States this year, he has not won. He's been running good races in Canada, but I haven't really seen the really solid efforts in graded stakes here in the United States. So, with him and the final horse in this race, is Stan the Man, and he is kind of the same thing as Wicked Trick, except he was finished behind him in the Stymie Stakes. So, I look at that and that turns me off even more. His 2 starts this year have been 5th and 6th place efforts in the Jazzle and Stymie Stakes, respectively. He did win the Queens County Stakes at Aqueduct in December of last year, but in the True North last year in 2019, that wasn't the greatest effort for him. He was 2nd in the Westchester, but there's a lot of, he's got wins in allowance company, but there's not really the efforts in the graded stakes races. He hasn't won a graded stake. He was 2nd in the Westchester, but that is his one highlight on his career in terms of graded stakes. So really, you look at the 2 favorites in this race. I don't like either of them, but with what's underneath them, I don't really think there's another way you can go in this race. As much as it would pain me to say, I got to go with one of the top 2 horses here. I'm going to go with Promises Fulfilled. I'm going to swallow the layoff and give him credit for what he's done at Belmont Park in the past. I don't like him. I don't really like him at all. And this is a race I'm okay with getting beat in because there's just a lot of questions with the top 2 on the front end. I'm going to go with Midnight Charlie, give him credit for what he has been doing against the allowance company in his races down in Pennsylvania. I'll put him 2nd. I will have Firenze Fire 3rd, and I'll go Wicked Trick 4th to throw in another long shot in there, just for no other reason other than I don't really think there's any reason not to. This is a race that I would not bet. Of the 4 stakes on the NYRA card, I think this is the weakest of the 3, of the 4, excuse me. So personally, I would not bet this race, but that is what I think about this race as a whole. It's an interesting race. It's intriguing. There's a lot of horses that got to answer some questions, but as for me, bettable, I don't want it, but that's what I got. Promises Fulfilled, Midnight Charlie, Firenze Fire, and Wicked Trick. So that's it for this video. Good luck if you do decide to play this race, and hopefully we'll see you next week with some more action from New York. Have a good one.
It up from the back of the pack, but still with a lot to do, and a 1/4 mile to the finish. It is Diamond King, American Anthem on the outside. Diamond King narrowly. American Anthem is all out in 2nd. Then Backside of the Moon. Wicked Trick is out in the middle of the track as they pass the 8th pole. Diamond King is in front. American Anthem runs in 2nd. It's Diamond King with the lead. American Anthem giving chase, and Backside of the Moon. Diamond King from off the layoff to win the Stymie.